meeting etiquette before we get started. Oh, thank you for starting the recording, Karen. Just some meeting etiquette before we get started. If you're not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent when you are speaking, so that those in the meeting know who is talking. So today, our agenda today, we will do welcome and introductions. I have a brief PowerPoint that just gives an overview of SB 824 and the purpose of the rulemaking, and then we're going to review the proposed rule changes. There are two options today for rule changes. Both were sent out to you in the materials prior to the RAC, and then we'll have some time for group discussion and feedback. And then we'll review some of the questions in the statement of need and fiscal impact. We'll have some brief time for public comment, and then we'll discuss next steps. So any questions before we get started? All right, well, why don't we start with introductions? I've already introduced myself. We'll start with the DFR folks that are on the line. Why don't we start with Lisa? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning. I'm Lisa Emerson. I'm a senior policy advisor with a focus on health, and I've been working on the behavioral health parity rulemakings over the last few years, and also the behavioral health report. I'll pass it over to, I'll say Cassie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cassie Susi. I almost said a senior policy. That's when I last was with this group. I'm the insurance compliance manager for the division. So many familiar faces, been working in this space since the rules were first promulgated through a series of many RAC meetings a couple years ago. Happy to be here today, and I will pass it to Mark to introduce himself.
Good morning, I'm Mark Rivers. I'm a data analyst with the Division of Financial Regulation and specializing in behavioral health parity. I will pass it on next to Spencer.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me okay. I am actually getting my car taken care of right now. So I'm Spencer Peacock. I am with the Division of Financial Regulation as well. Data analyst, been here about 10 years, involved in all things insurance as well as other financial programs. I can't quite see who else from DFR is on the call, so if there's anyone else, I'll pass it over to you.
Good
morning, my name is Jason Saldivar, and I am an insurance compliance analyst with the division here, and I have been involved with the behavioral health parity reporting and review since we started that in 2021.
And I also see Rick.
Yep. Good morning, Rick Perry, lead and I've been in the field since 2016.
Barely hear you, Rick.
No?
Oh, now I can hear you.
Okay, good. Rick Berry, lead health forms analyst, and I've been with the division in that role since 2016.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the glitch.
No problems. And did we get all the DFR folks?
And I'm Karen Winkle, the rules coordinator for the division, helping facilitate this meeting and filing the rules.
Can't forget Karen. She's arguably the most important person in this meeting right now. So thank you, Karen. All right, and now we'll start with the RAC members. I'm just going to go down who I see on my list on my screen right now. So we'll start with Antoinette.
Hello, good morning. My name is Antoinette Awache, and I am the Senior Regulatory and Public Affairs Specialist for Cambia Health, also known as Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon. Happy to be involved this second time around. I participated in the first one, so back again for the second one. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Antoinette. And Jen?
Hi, Jen Baker, with Director of Government Affairs with Cigna Health.
Thank you, Jennifer. Cheryl Ramirez.
Hi, Cheryl Ramirez. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Oregon Community Mental Health Programs.
Thank you, Cheryl. And Dan Toma.
Good morning, Dan Toma. I don't think I'm actually a RAC member, but I'm a consultant working with Moda Health.
Thanks, Dan. Gary?
Good morning, Gary Holiday with Pacific Source Health Plans, Director of Compliance for the Commercial Line of Business.
Thank you, Gary. And Iris from COPACT?
Hello, everyone. Iris Maria Chavez. I represent the professional counselors and therapists.
Thank you, Iris. Jen Davis.
Hello, I'm Jim Davis. I am a retired gerontologist, social psychologist, professor, been an advocate for seniors and people with disabilities for 50 years. I currently chair the state older adult disability behavioral health advisory council, and I also chair the insurance advisory committee for the state, and I've been on that for over 30 years. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Jim. JL Wilson.
Good morning, JL Wilson, lobbyist for the Oregon Independent Mental Health Professionals. Senate Bill 824 was a priority bill for us.
Thank you, JL. Melissa Todd.
Hi, I'm Melissa Todd. I am a psychologist in Eugene. I am also here for the Oregon Independent Mental Health Professionals. We are a legislative advocacy group that is supported by the Western Oregon Mental Health Alliance.
Thank you, Melissa. Scott White.
Good morning. My name's Scott White. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs for Moda Health. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And Shiloh Smith.
Hello, my name is Shiloh Smith. I am brand new to Moda, and I am the new Director of Behavioral Health. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiloh. And is there anybody I missed? All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here for this RAC meeting. Hopefully this one-day RAC meeting, which could potentially be more than one day depending on the route that we take today. But we did plan for this to be a one and done RAC, but we'll see how this progresses. And Karen, if you want to pull up the PowerPoint, we'll just kind of go into an overview of SB 824 and the reason for the rulemaking today. So next slide, please.
Oh my goodness. I have not done this with the PDF in the new.
I think you have to scroll down.
In the new.
There we go.
Okay, I'll just do it that way. Okay, sorry.
All right. So what is SB 824? So SB 824 was passed in the 2025 legislative session. It is a bill that was introduced by DCBS, and it was introduced because, as many of you recall, HB 3046, which was passed in 2021, is the bill that made the behavioral health parity reporting requirements in a rule in Oregon, and it was the underlying statute for the reporting rule as it stands today. And that HB 3046, it did have a requirement which made quantitative data reporting sunset in 2025. And so I think we've done behavioral health parity reporting reports for the past 4 years, maybe 5 years. I think it's 4 years now. So for the past 4 years, all of our behavioral health parity reports have included quantitative data as well as the non-quantitative treatment limitation data. However, the most current report, the 2025 report, does not include that quantitative data because as of 2025, carriers were no longer required to report that quantitative data. However, the department did determine that quantitative data was very useful for determining parity in Oregon. So we decided that we wanted to introduce a bill that would make that quantitative data reporting requirement ongoing in Oregon. So that's why we introduced SB 824, and that bill does restore and make permanent the quantitative data reporting requirement for behavioral health parity, and it also makes carrier submitted data confidential. So any data submitted to the department under behavioral health parity is now confidential. The rulemaking is needed because the current rule, it does have a line in it which makes all of the quantitative data in the reporting rule no longer required to be reported after 2025. And so we do need to take that line out so that the quantitative data, it does continue to be reported in the future. And we also do need to insert a clause in the reporting rule which makes the information reported to the department confidential. The main rule changes, again, I've already stated this, but it does remove that kind of one line that would sunset the quantitative data reporting. It makes quantitative and non-quantitative data reporting permanent, and it adds a confidentiality provision for all reported data. So all data reported to the department is now confidential, and it does update rule citations and statutory authority throughout the rule text. So I did provide to you 2 options for rulemaking today. The reason that we did that is because we decided, we are opening up the reporting rule, to make the changes necessary from the statute, and those changes really are from the statute are very minimal. The changes from the statute, that's option 2. It really just does make the required changes from the statute, which is removing that one line which sunsets the quantitative data reporting and adding a confidentiality provision to the reporting rule. But we did talk internally, and we decided that we wanted to present a different option to everyone today because, as we've done for years of reporting, we have continued to get questions from carriers around, some of the language in our reporting rule. We also have, as we've done 4 years of reporting, we have determined that we probably need to make some clarifications to our reporting rule, and we probably have carriers that would like to make some clarifications to our reporting rule now. And so since we are opening up the rule to make the changes from the statute, we wanted to present an option where we also made clarifications to the reporting rule to kind of to update the rule to make changes that make clarifications to the most common questions that we get from carriers to the reporting rule, and also make updates to the reporting requirements to better align the reporting requirements for assessing behavioral health parity. And so that's why there's an option 1 that kind of does make those clarifications to better align the reporting rule with behavioral health parity and clarify some of the most common questions that we get on an annual basis from carriers regarding the reporting rule. Here's the rulemaking process and timeline. So for today, we're going to review the proposed rule updates. We'll collect feedback from all of the RAC members. We will revise the rule as needed and circulate updated drafts. If we do need to add another RAC meeting, we will add another RAC meeting. Like I said earlier, we had planned for this to be, kind of a one and done RAC. But if there is a need to have another RAC meeting, we can add another RAC meeting as needed. And then eventually we will file the proposed rule for public comment. The next steps, submit any written feedback. This is an error by me because July 5th has already passed. So the date should be August 5th. Any written feedback on the rule by August 5th, depending on the option that we choose today. We will review and incorporate the feedback as appropriate. We will submit the proposed rule for public comment, and then notice will be sent out when the rule is open for public comment. And then I believe the next slide just has my contact information on it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Any questions, comments, I'm here if you have anything. So any questions before we get started reviewing the rule? Okay, I'm going to start with option 1, which is the option that makes the changes, the clarifications and the changes to the reporting rule. As we go through the draft rule, I'll highlight each change. I'll talk about why we made each change and point you to where you can find it in the rule text. The goal is to have a straightforward discussion and to help give targeted feedback on the rule. And I'll stop and pause for feedback, but if I don't pause, feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me. It's fine if you have a question, comment, feedback, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you, or, just interrupt me. That's fine as well. Okay, so the first change is in section 3. In the first paragraph right here, where the date was changed from 2022 to 2026. This lines up with SB 824's implementation schedule, and it gives carriers enough time to update their reporting processes. And if you scroll down, the next change is right here in E, and then there are additional changes throughout the rule that needs to be made. I think I've made comments where I need to update the statutory references, but really this is just updating the statutory references to point to the correct ORS rather than the Oregon law and chapter. And this keeps the rule aligned with current law and makes sure that everyone is working from the same set of legal standards. And the next change is right here in section 3B. This is the line I was talking about, which sunsets the quantitative data reporting. So we just deleted this line, and this makes the quantitative data reporting requirements ongoing. So it deletes that sunset and makes all quantitative data reporting ongoing from now forward. And from here forward is kind of the changes that we have made, that the department has made to the reporting rule based on some of the kind of common questions that we've had from carriers. So the first is in this section 3F. sub-items I through 5. So we're now asking carriers to report in 2 here, the number and percentage of denials that were appealed. And then we added 3 here, which is the percentage of appeals where an initial decision has not been made. We're making this change because, one, denials and partial denials and full denials. This is one of the most common questions that we've gotten from carriers, is how to report this data, whether we should include full denials and partial denials, and how to report denial information. And so we're trying to make this clear in the rule, so that it is clear to carriers how to report this information. And we're also making the change on the number of percentage and the percentage of appeals where initial decision has been made, because this gives us a clear and more complete picture of the appeals process for behavioral health claims. And knowing how many denials gets appealed helps us see if members are using their appeal rights. It also helps us see if there are any obstacles at that stage. Tracking the percentage of appeals still waiting a decision lets us spot delays that might help keep people from accessing timely care. And these details really do help us detect any disparities in how behavioral health claims are handled compared to medical surgical, and to make sure that carriers are complying not only with parity laws, but also with timely review and resolution standards. So I'm going to take a minute to stop right here for feedback on the changes that we've made to this section, but I also want to have a larger conversation with the RAC about the way that we are collecting denial data, and whether or not we should change the way we are collecting denial data. And Cassie, feel free to jump in at any time, Cassie Spencer. But historically, we have collected denial data at the service line level, meaning that every denied service or procedure gets counted on its own. And the problem that we have seen with this historically is that claims data is usually tracked by the overall claim, not by each individual service. And so this means that it's very tough for us to compare denials to claims, because, again, denials are currently tracked at the service line level, while claims levels are tracked by overall claims. So we want to have a conversation about whether or not we should, going forward, report denials at the whole claim level rather than the service line level, meaning that a full denial means the entire claim was denied, and a partial denial means that some services were denied, but not all. And doing this would help us make comparisons, better comparisons, with claim counts and denial counts, and show us how often people are denied for a whole visit rather than just part of their care. So I want to stop here. Make sure, Cassie Spencer, I characterized that correctly. And then 2, I want to open it up to the RAC for feedback on whether or not that is something that we should change in the reporting rule, because that's not something that I've done currently. And also any feedback that about any of the changes that I've discussed currently with the reporting rule.
I'll just really quickly jump in and say, Brooke, you did a really great job of characterizing the denial issue. From my perspective, in terms of monitoring compliance, we don't want to lose any information regarding partial denials, since that can still be a piece that we want to look at as in terms of our parity review. And so I'll just throw that out there of like, we don't want to create something where we would perhaps lose that piece of information around partial denials. We want to create something that works for, hopefully is easy enough for everyone to report on, and still gets us that information to understand what's happening in that space. So.
Thanks, Cassie. Antoinette, I see your hand up first, so go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Antoinette from Cambia Health. I guess in looking strictly at the purpose of the RAC, which was to reinstate the requirements that, with respect to the quantitative reporting, that had sunset. I feel like this may be a little bit out of scope, although we do appreciate the clarification that you're trying to make here, but just maybe some food for thought. Maybe the clarification needs to be actually in the template rather than in the rules. I know that when it comes to the Patient Protection Act, for example, the prior authorization, the grievance and prior authorization portion of that 4-part report, any sort of data that was confusing actually in the rules, or what, could have been clear but wasn't, it's now clarified a little bit better in the template. And I really do appreciate a DCBS actually reaching out to carriers saying, hey, we've made changes to the template. What do you think? Just for a better carrier reporting experience. So that's my thought with respect to this one.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just for clarification, Antoinette, are you talking about the question of the partial claims at the service level versus the whole claims, or are you talking about the changes that are made in the reporting rule as a whole, or are you talking about both?
I'm talking specifically about the changes that is made in the reporting, but to the other issue, that's something I need to take back to my folks because it's something outside of Senate Bill 824. But the DFR is looking at that information to be helpful for their purposes. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that, Antoinette. And Scott, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Brooke. And just another thing about denials at the service line level. I like the idea of having it at the claim level and not claim line level. Also, something else that we had to make clear in our, 2 years ago report, last year's report, we're always a year behind, I forget, that the appeals are reported at a claim level as well. So numbers don't really add up well to analyze them. And so I think making changes to that process would be beneficial, would allow you to have some more usable numbers. Another one is just when we're talking about the total number of denials. So we're reporting med-surg total number of denials at the service line level. And then we have behavioral health, and then you have number of appeals. Just the numbers themselves. So let's say, for example, we had, which is typically the case, a much, much larger amount of med-surg overall denials, just because you have a broader range of services, they may be more commonly billed, so on and so forth, and a smaller amount of behavioral health denials. Just having a document that says that, or if it was vice versa, how are you getting and using that to establish parity? Because would it make more sense to do like utilization review denials that might actually show you where things are being held up in the process? Because all claim denials, that could be improper billing on the provider. It could be a million different things. And those numbers, we have 300 times more med-surg claims than behavioral health claims. That's not denials. That's not indicative of that. Behavioral health parity is being met because there's more med-surg than behavioral health denials. It doesn't mean anything, really. It's just numbers, and there's so many variables going into that. Why not focus it more to like utilization review denials? They could really see where there are holdups in the process that maybe, they're applying utilization review differently to behavioral health than med-surg, other than just this broad swath of denial numbers, if that makes sense. And I'd just like the DCBS opinion on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Scott. I think I'm going to let Cassie jump in. I saw her come off mute for a sec.
Yeah, I guess a question for you, Scott. So instead of kind of, just to clarify my understanding, you're suggesting instead of just the flat denial for the overall claim, having it sort of broken out by like utilization management type, so that you could understand a bit more fully of why, perhaps like where the denial's happening, as opposed to just not getting that specific information. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to create extra work and having to break down every category of 500,000 denials that might occur on a med surge basis or something. I don't really want to do that, but not including all denials, but denials for utilization review would maybe give you a little bit more to go on from a parity standpoint, in my opinion, than just every denial, because you have so many like improper claim build, or it's just not indicative of anything either way. And I'm all for providing this information, but I want to provide useful information.
Right.
And if someone looked at this that didn't have that background, it could be negative or positive in a way that is irrelevant based on the data being asked for. That data is not indicative of a problem or of success. And that's the challenging part about this.
Yeah, appreciate that, Scott. And I think I just want to point out that one of the reasons, again, that we wanted to present this kind of option to make changes to the reporting rule is because for the past 4 years that we've done the behavioral health parity analysis, the division has really struggled because kind of making apples to apples comparison with the data that has been reported to us, it has been really difficult because of some of the the challenges that we've talked about today. And because it is very difficult to kind of make comparisons with the data that is being reported when those comparisons are not necessarily we're not comparing the same data, right? They're not. Right. It is not an apples to apples comparison, and so we're really struggling and really trying to find a way to present, to analyze the data in a way where we are making more meaningful comparisons, and to present the data in a way where we are showing that we are making more meaningful comparisons, and where we can really show how parity is being displayed in Oregon. And so that kind of is the impetus for kind of trying to make these changes to the reporting rules now, because we do have the opportunity to do it now, and we have the reporting rule open now, and even though everybody has the best intentions for perhaps making these changes in the future, but we know that time is always an obstacle, and though we may have the best intentions for opening up the reporting rule and making these changes later, that is not something that is always going to happen in the future. And so that's why we wanted to kind of present this as an option today. So any other kind of feedback about either the kind of conversation around the claims and denials, or about the changes that have been made in I through 5? And go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, sorry. Just another point to Brooke, to kind of exactly what you were talking about making this meaningful, is, to me, the NQTL analyses and some of the new parameters that were implemented around additional documentation we had to show there regarding denials, appeals, applying utilization review. that gets you so much closer to being able to make good determinations than just number of denials, number of appeals. I mean, because it's too broad. There's too many categories. Every denial, I don't know how you make meaningful determinations based on that. And maybe that's just, and again, maybe it can be explained. So that could be just my opinion. But the NQTL piece is where, I know our behavioral health team puts tons of energy into providing extremely detailed, because that shows you what your policies are, how you got to them, how you're applying them in a way that is not discriminatory for behavioral health services. There's even data in there now about appeals and utilization and review and things like that really would paint the better picture than this part of the data call. And I'm just interested to see if I'm alone in that, or does DCBS feel that they get a lot of information that you couldn't get from, I don't know, the all-payer claims database or some other source here, if we're just looking at all denials we've had in the year 2024 and appeals? Is this the best place to get that? And, sorry, Brooke, that was a lot, but that's kind of where I'm coming from on this one.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. And what I'll say, and I'll let the team back me up on this if they'd like to as well. But what we've seen from the last 4 years of reporting, the NQTL data is extremely useful. However, what we've seen is that the quantitative data really does help to support the NQTL information. And really, this year, without the quantitative data that we have had access to in the past, it really does kind of make the ability to analyze that NQTL information much more difficult. Having access to some of that quantitative information, it makes the ability to make comparisons and analyze the NQTL data much more in depth and much easier. And Cassie, Jason, go ahead and help back me up on this if you would like.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and Jason or anyone else on the call can follow up as well. But hear sort of what you're saying, Scott, and just want to emphasize, like, for us in terms of the analysis, when you get to the in operation, that's where the data is the most useful, right? Like, it is super helpful to get the documentation on procedures and sort of policies and things like that that you have in place for utilization management. But for in operation, right, like, what is the reality of the in practice? That's where I think this kind of more quantitative information is incredibly useful to our analysis.
Yeah, and Cassie, for I would say that would make sense to me. And that was kind of along with my first comment about maybe keeping the denials to utilization management and not all denial, because the piece would make sense, and it would tie directly into us doing what we're doing, where we're not applying stricter standards, especially during utilization review. But just overall denials seems like you're going to miss that part that might be the really important piece. But yeah, thank you for that clarification.
And Jason, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to keep jumping in front of Jennifer. I apologize, but I just wanted to speak really quickly on that. As we all, kind of know, I think the big issue for this, and the reason why we want to include the quantitative information as well as the non-quantitative, is that, no one single, number or indicator is going to tell us, positively that there is a lack of parity by an insurer in any one policy or process. And so I think that this is just one more option for us as a division to kind of put together statistically some industry standards and guidelines and maybe industry-wide, statuses, where we can then, add that to the overall, picture of an insurer's parity, whether they are an outlier compared to, other standards and things like that for other carriers. So I think that what we're looking for with this is just to be able to combine, additional metrics to get a better picture of an overall carrier's, parity process.
Thanks, Jason. And go ahead, Jennifer.
So thank you. I'm kind of with Antoinette a little bit here. I'm a little wary of adding language like that. I mean, and again, I don't do these reports. So if I'm getting something wrong, if it's already in there and I'm not aware of this, please let me know. But percentage of appeals where an initial decision has not been made. I feel like the definition of initial decision could go in a variety of different directions. So I feel like this is adding something new that hasn't had the opportunity for discussion, and would prefer that it not be in the rule. And I think we probably should stick to just what the bill requires us to do, because I feel like we're creating new policy.
Thank you, Jen. Go ahead, Jason.
I'll just jump in real quick here, just because from my understanding in the past years, these, while they are new language into the rule, these were added at our request on the analyzation end, because these are already numbers and statistics we've been requesting for the last 4 years in that data template. If I believe, is that correct, Spencer and Mark?
So why do we need to add it to the rule then?
Yeah. Good question.
We added it to the rule again because these are questions that we've continued to receive from carriers, and we're trying to make it clearer in the rule what we're asking for. Though I do understand what you're saying, both Jennifer and Antoinette, that we could go the route of just making the required changes from the statute and adding these changes to the templates. Which is why we presented both options today. And part of the reason that we, presented the changes in the reporting rule in option 1 is because I know that there are carriers and others out there who would potentially like to make some additional clarifications to the reporting rule. I wanted to also have that conversation with the RAC as well, which is what other changes to the reporting rule, do others potentially want to see happen or could see happen, not just the ones that are currently here. And so the conversation really is about do there need to be additional clarifications, made to the reporting rule so that we have the information in the reporting rule necessary to to better assess parity, and so that carriers have a better understanding of what it is that the DFR wants to see every year. And go ahead, Gary.
Thanks, Brooke. Gary Holiday, Pacific Source Health Plans. Brooke, I'm not. I think the concern, at least I know from Pacific Source, is falls in a little bit with what Scott's saying. We're giving you this data, but we're concerned that is it really beneficial to you? By saying just a denial, that's very broad. And what our challenge, or at least Pacific Source challenge, is I don't know what DFR is looking at. You have data analysts here. We look at this data a little bit too, and I'm not sure what you're trying to extrapolate from this. If you're just looking at appeals straight up, okay, I think if you can narrow it down to or something else, that would help us. But when you ask us, are we supportive of these changes? We don't know. We don't get to dive in on these. So it's a little hard for at least Pacific Source to say, yes, let's go ahead and add these to the rules, when I don't know what your guys' process is with Spencer and Mark and those guys to say, hey, these pieces of data are wrong, or we're going to give you this data, but there's going to be all these ins and outs from it. And that's what Pacific Source gets a little concerned about, is the conclusions that are drawn from these high level data that we submit. And it goes to the same point of, do we give you a claim or a service line? you know, you can go back and forth. If we do service line, then you can remove all the partials out of there. But then you could triple the number of data points we give you in there. So I kind of side with Scott. If we can narrow down exactly what is it DFR is looking at when they do their parity analysis, that may help us get through these rules a little bit easier, as opposed to keep asking us, do we support these or not? Because for me to say, yep, let's give you the total number or percentage of appeals where initial decision has not been made, I don't know what you can conclude from that, unless there's something I'm missing in an algorithm or a formula that DFR is using. So that's it.
And if I could just kind of add to what Gary was saying, I mean, like, again, I don't do the reporting directly, but I would like to see how these things have been asked in prior reports compared to how you're entering these requirements into the rule. I think that you know, and that side by side would be warranted before we can make any decisions on adding more language to the rule, other than what is required in SB 824. So, I mean, again, I'm reluctant to add new language that isn't required in 824, because I just don't know how the interpretation is obviously, you know, can go in a variety of ways.
Appreciate that, Jen. And Cassie, go ahead.
Yeah, totally hear the concerns that are being raised, both from Gary and Jen, as well as Antoinette. But I think it's a little bit of where we're at, like behavioral health parity, I think, as many folks know, is still an area that states are figuring out what is the most useful. And in terms of that, I think there's this sort of, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, kind of like, what do we put in the rule versus what Jason intimated. There are things that we've been asking as separate follow-ups, and we can continue doing it that way. It's more, you know, trying to codify what we've been doing for the past couple years into the rules, so it's expected every year and it's not a surprise to you all, and also honoring the fact that you've got several teams that probably work really hard to pull this information together, and trying to be upfront about that. Now, if folks are okay with kind of the follow-up approach, that's fine as well. But I think we just want to be clear about sort of, we've been asking for this information. It's been useful in terms of our parity analysis. Is it time to put it into the rule, or do we continue with follow-ups after the fact? And this was one of them that was a follow-up for the majority of companies over several years that was sent out, is my understanding.
Respond really quick. I'm not as concerned about number and percentage of, you know, or total count language. I'm more concerned about the sub-3% of appeals where an initial decision has not been made. Again, I feel like that can be interpreted initial decision. It could be carrier specific, or, you know, how we gather that data can be different. And, you know, I'd like to have a broader carrier discussion about that before we enter that language. Okay. So I want to be clear.
Yeah.
I do see it in the template under denials for the 2024 report. And again, it's in the template. You are getting that data. So again, yeah, that's not, I understand what the DFR is trying to do, put that in there in the rules, but yeah, it's just one of those things. It could be just fine, as you know, you guys are doing, you know, in the template. But again, something that I definitely need to take back to my team. And I do support Scott Gary's and Jennifer's comment with respect to, what exactly the DFR is trying to get at. So anyways, just wanted to make that additional point, but it is in the template. Wanted to make sure.
Thanks, Antoinette. All right, I'm going to move on to the last change that we've made to the reporting section, which is in this G right here, where we've added a percentage and total count of claims paid to in-network and out-of-network providers for behavioral health and medical surgical benefits. We made this change because having both the percentage and the raw count of paid claims gives us a more accurate and meaningful picture of access. If we just have percentages, we don't know the actual number of claims. And if we just have counts, we don't know the proportion paid out of the total. When we have both, we can better spot trends and disparities and make sure that we have the data we need to monitor parity compliance. And then the last change is in section 4, where we've added the confidentiality language. If you scroll down, Karen.
Sorry, got distracted. I'm sorry, which section? Section 4?
Yep, keep going down.
All right.
This right here, I just need to add a statutory reference, but if you keep going down, at the very end, yep, right there. So this right here, it just makes all information submitted to the department under this rule confidential and not subject to public disclosure as provided in ORS 705.137. And then I need to update that statutory reference right there. So those are the changes that we've made kind of in option 1. I know we've kind of had a kind of robust conversation about, the changes that the department has offered in the reporting rule, but I do want to open it up to anybody in the RAC who had any additional kind of changes that you wanted to offer for discussion for the reporting rule as a whole. Go ahead, Gary.
I think it would be good, Brooke, and I'd be interested in the community members, if we do put in the rule, claim versus service line. I think that would need to be in there. I know it may include it on the template, but as I think through this, Lisa, I would recommend that it be put in the rule if this is, because this language throughout the rules all claims, and if in the template we decide to go service line, I would have a little concerns there. But I said interested in others, I wouldn't be upset if you didn't, but I think it would help reduce any confusion out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Any other thoughts? All right, Karen, why don't you, go ahead, Melissa.
I just wanted to generally say that we support more specificity just because of the history of things sometimes being a little bit murky and different insurers reporting different things because of things not being clear. So just in general, we support more detail and specificity.
Thank you, Melissa. And Scott?
Just wanted to see, were there trends from issuers that were identified in this reporting where data elements were very difficult to get in an extractable format? Because some of these, I think, like provider contracted rates, I think this is H. I know it was really difficult operationally to pull all that and get it into an extractable format for submission. And I guess were other areas identified like that due to system limitations or whatever, you're not getting really the data that you want? And are there ways to, again, kind of going to adding more specificity or caveating certain things. I know that piece especially was really difficult to get into an extractable format and get collated for this report. And has that been reviewed? Were there other instances of that maybe parameters could be changed to still get what you want, but make it in a more system-friendly way for issuers?
Yeah, that's yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up, Scott, because that's something that I should have brought up. It is in H, Karen, if you go up, I believe. The rule currently itself does ABCD right there. It does require carriers to report on the median maximum allowable reimbursement rate for both provider contracted rates and for incurred claim rates. However, we've never received information on contracted rates just because, as we understand it from most of the carriers, that information is very difficult, if not impossible, to currently gather. And so for the last 4 or 5 years of behavioral health parity reporting, carriers have been reporting on incurred claims rates and not contracted rates. And so, contracted claims rates is still currently in the rule. However, we have not been gathering information on contracted claims rates. And so, it does warrant a conversation about whether the division, should gather information on contracted claims rates, whether the language in the rule currently needs to change, and what is the current status of carriers' ability to gather information on and provide that information on contracted claims rates should we decide to move forward with the language that is currently in the rule. So I would love to hear from carriers kind of your ability to provide that information should we decide to move forward with the language that is in the rule, and whether or not we should make any changes to that language that is in H currently.
Thanks, Brooke. Yeah, I can speak for MOTA that is, we don't have a way to extract that. And I think we've went back and forth with the analysts before, or trying to explain that process. And it seems like we're not alone in that for that deliverable.
What are the limitations there, Scott? Can you, because I don't
Oh,
know that
boy.
I don't know that I was
my depth really quick,
when that conversation happened. So I'd love to hear kind of what the limitations are.
I will try. I'll have to go back to the ops units because I don't specifically pull that, and it's been since last March. But I remember that being a problem, so I can put that in a comment letter.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Some specifics there.
Do other carriers have thoughts on that kind of contracted rates versus incurred claims, and whether or not you'd have the ability to provide us with information on contracted rates currently? Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, we can do contract rates, but it takes a lot of work because we contract with providers, and a lot of them will, provide behavioral health services, but they really won't administer it. But it's part of the contract in case they ever do. And I think that's what gets a little bit of us concerned is once you want to see what's actually occurring in the market, as opposed to some providers who could provide the service in their license, but they never do. So they may not have that big a concern on that rate where others would. Mm-hmm. So I get a little concerned there.
Okay. Melissa, go ahead.
I was in the other rack for HB 3046, and this was something that we discussed a lot. And one of the things that came up is that, as one of the limitations of this is that behavioral health contracts versus medical surgical contracts might differ across insurers. And that as a behavioral health provider, what I find is that some insurance companies do not tend to negotiate with behavioral health providers, particularly when they are individuals. That may be a little different if they're a large group practice. And so they have kind of like a standard contract that pretty much the majority of independent behavioral health professionals are on. And then I think on the medical end, that might differ. There may be more variation in contracts and less variation in contracts on the behavioral health side, which in and of itself is a difference? Is it a meaningful disparity? I think that can be up to debate. I think that in the past it has been, but I think that since HB 3046 and particularly the reporting requirements with regard to reimbursement, I think that maybe it's less so. But in the past, it has been a disparity where there are more negotiated contracts on the medical surgical side, and some carriers actually were openly saying, and I think still do, that they don't tend to negotiate with particularly individual behavioral health providers.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Any other thoughts on this contracted rates versus incurred claims? Okay. I'm going to move on really quickly to the option B. If you want to pull that up, the changes to option B are much more limited because again, it does just make changes based on the statute SB 824, and so really the changes are just first in 3, it does change that date from 2022 to 2026. To update the implementation date based on the statute. It does update the statutory references throughout to the correct statutory references. And it does in 3B, it removes the sunset language so that it makes the quantitative data reporting ongoing from 2026, I believe, 2026 forward. So the quantitative data reporting would be permanent from 2026 forward. And then if you go all the way down to the end, the final change is that language, keep going, Karen, which updates the confidentiality. It makes the information submitted to the department confidential and not subject to public disclosure. So again, this is the much more limited version of the rule, which just kind of makes the required updates based on the statute. And we're presenting this to the RAC for your feedback, just kind of as an option, but we want to hear your feedback on both option A and option B. Really willing to hear feedback on both, which you would prefer to move forward with. And even if there's a hybrid approach, if you'd like to make some changes to the reporting rule, but not all of the changes that we've submitted in option A, we'd like to hear that as well. So any kind of final thoughts on the reporting rule before we move forward? Melissa, go ahead.
I actually just have a question back to H and about what you were saying about how even though it is written in rule that the median maximum allowable reimbursement rate is provided for contracted rates, and you're saying that the majority of insurers, or maybe all of them, have not been providing that. How does that work when it is in rule and it is being requested but not provided? Is there any recourse for the DFR to enforce that, or to still compel insurers to produce that data in some form or another?
Yeah, I mean, for the last 4 years, we've made allowances to not require the information for contracted rates, and we've just required the information on incurred claims based on the lack of ability to provide that information by carriers. So carriers have indicated to us that they do not currently have the ability to provide information on contracted rates. And so we've kind of relaxed the reporting requirement in that area with the caveat that we will kind of revisit that in the future. And, we as a division are looking to revisit kind of all of the reporting rules, going forward. That's kind of why we're having that conversation now. And with Cassie coming on board kind of in a new role and, bringing some new people on board in the, data analysis section, we are looking at how we can, better align some of our behavioral health parity analysis. And so we are kind of looking at, what changes we can make to the reporting rule and how we can better align the analysis that we're doing moving forward. And Cassie, anybody else want to jump in, feel free, but that's kind of, how we have been doing things in the past and how we're kind of looking towards the future. So those are conversations that we'll be having, with carriers as we move forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Karen, do you want to pull up the agenda again? All right, so for the statement of need and fiscal impact, does anybody have any feedback on how this rule may impact how this rule may impact the financial impact for any small businesses. If anybody has any feedback, go ahead and let me know. I want to pull up the SNFI. I'm trying to find it. Just a minute. Oh, here we go. That's not what I want. Okay. I'm going to share my screen for a sec. Okay, Karen. Okay. Okay, so everybody can see the statement of need and fiscal impact?
Yes.
Okay. So if anybody has any feedback on one, how the rule will affect equity in the state. Okay, hearing none. And the fiscal and economic impact, including the impact on the cost of compliance for small businesses. Okay, hearing none. Okay, so if you want to pull back up the agenda, Karen. I think now would be the time for public comment. Yes. All right. So if there's now's the time for public comment. So if there are any members of the public who would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and let me know. Dan, go ahead.
Again, Dan Toma. I was involved in the previous rulemaking for this, for 3046, and working currently as a consultant for Moda Health. And I just want to kind of give a little bit of additional background regarding that, regarding H and in claims incurred versus contracts, and just say that I would be concerned about leaving that claims incurred in the rule, kind of to what Melissa raised. If it's in the rule and you're not enforcing it, which hasn't been done for 4 years, then that's just sort of a weird disparity. And if we haven't made any progress on being able to report it over 4 years, I would wonder about the ability to make progress in doing that. And as far as the challenges that carriers face in reporting that information, I know Scott's going to follow up with more directly from our analytics teams, but basically those are things that are in documents all over the place. And that's not a format that we can report in. It's true that the elements of that do get entered into the claim system, but again, it's so dispersed, and there's no operational data being generated from that. So it's just really we don't know of a way to go in and pull that information out. As far as the value of that information or potential value of that information, I can understand the point was brought up in the previous rack about, well, we want to know, like maybe if providers aren't being, there's stuff that's not being reflected in claims experiences because providers have just given up and they're like not submitting these claims because the reimbursement is too low. And I appreciate that argument, but I also feel like that's probably not where what you might get from that is probably not super significant. It's more an issue of people who've retired or died or moved on or just haven't had opportunity to provide those services to your members. And looking at claims incurred when we think about the operational, as written and as in operations, your claims incurred really gives you a much more meaningful view of the services that are actually being provided, what's happening, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, in terms of what the services that are being provided and reimbursed. So I do find that thing it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb for me.
Yeah, appreciate that, Dan. Any other comments? Okay, next steps. So I think at this point, I'm going to ask carriers to provide feedback on both option 1, option A, and option B of the rule. I also would like to hear from carriers their ability to provide information on contracted rates. So if you could include that kind of in any feedback that you provide to the division, that would be helpful. And if anybody does have any feedback on those questions that are from the statement of need and fiscal impact on the rules impact on equity or the rules impact on the financial impact to small business, you can include that in your comments as well. I believe I asked for feedback by August 5th. So if you could provide any feedback by August 5th, that would be helpful. I will send just a list, of questions, saying feedback on option A, option B, send me information about your ability to provide information on contracted rates, and then the SNFI questions out to the group. So if you can, I'll send that out to the group today. And then, once I have all that feedback back, that will kind of determine whether or not we need to have another RAC meeting or not. At this point, I don't know. It will really it'll be determined based on kind of the route that the RAC determines to take, and what further conversations that we need to have as a RAC as far as updates to the rule is concerned. And so that's kind of my thoughts at this point. Does anybody have any additional thoughts or questions? All right, well, I really appreciate your time today. This was very helpful, and I will send those questions out to the group. And thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks,
Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you.